Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Common Knowledge Podcast, a podcast dedicated to improving your skills in Magic the Gathering, particularly within the Pauper format. This is episode 9. I'm your host, Brandon Clark, and joined with me is a familiar face. He's been with me a couple times now, but this time he's with me as my new permanent co-host. Welcome, Sean.
Yeah, Lobbert, Sean Lobbert, last name that I redacted. Yeah, I'm excited to be here for permanency. I have some idea. I have a cool idea so far for the show. We're gonna time out this episode and see if we can fit it in though.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you. I know it's been a rough like month and a half for us. You know, we've been juggling, trying to get a co-host, trying to figure out what direction we wanted to go with the show, and Sean has graciously agreed to make this commitment for us and for you guys, the listeners, to be with us every week and to share his wealth of knowledge.
And I've been rearing to go and get involved with this since the start. I'm just psyched.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this and for the direction that we can take the show. And hopefully you guys, the listeners at home, love it. You know, we're excited. We're excited. So before we dive into the show, we want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, puremtgo.com. Check them out for anything Magic Online related, podcasts, articles, great content, just a great website. Check them out. You can also, we're not at the end of the show. I'm going to plug our Twitters at the end of the show. You don't need to know where to find us yet. Yeah.
We don't want to lose people before we even talk about something.
Yeah. All right. Check out our sponsor, Pure MTGO. Give them your support. Great stuff on that website. So let's just jump right in to the card of the week.
This one was my choice.
Yeah.
Seeker of the Way, the 2/2 prowess creature for 1 and a white. It doesn't have any relevant to Pauper creature types, at least they're not relevant yet. It's popped up mostly in the new heroic deck that, you know, it's kind of coming and going, and it's trying to see if it can actually get a foothold, I feel like, in the format. I feel like because Seeker of the Way exists, there's also, spoilers, we see it in a top 8 this week. Somebody crams it into Boros Monarch, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to include it on here. I think it's maybe it's one of the best white creatures. It might be like the best white 2-drop or something. Don't quote me on that. I haven't done my research. Do you have any thoughts on this card?
Yeah, I think I might agree with you that it's at least the most powerful white 2-drop, and it might.
Oh, I don't think I mentioned that. I don't think I even got into its text box. Did I? I want to say it has prowess, and when it triggers prowess, it gets lifelink.
Yeah, and it's a 2/2 for 1 and a white. So, but yeah, I think it is probably the most powerful white 2-drop. Maybe even one of the most powerful white creatures, but with as powerful as it is, I feel like it is struggling to find a foothold in the format. Why do you think that is?
You can't. It's not powerful enough to just build its own deck and just combo that way. But I think it's just the cards around it. Like, white kind of already has the archetypes that it has, and it doesn't fit into those super well. I think the Monarch deck is the closest one, but like heroic has to build around it. And I did look, and I think Core Skyfisher might beat it out in terms of power level as a white 2-drop.
Oh yeah, that card's
But
good.
that's about the only one. That card, yeah, that card's good. This card is also good though.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of hype behind Secret of the Way when it was spoiled in Iconic Masters as common, but it it just doesn't seem to have made the splash that I think people thought it was going to make. And I think that's kind of to your point that it kind of is you need to build around it to make it really good.
But
It
the
is a
build around
great
cards
card.
are like burn. Like
Yeah,
burn and cantrips are just good with the card. And that usually
yeah.
makes a good card. So I think it has some doing to do.
Hmm. I think its best home is probably like the Boros mid range decks, even more so than the heroic deck. I mean, it fits on plan with what the heroic deck is trying to do, but I think its best home is probably the Boros mid range decks, like Monarch Boros and Kuldaltha Boros and those decks. So, all right. Well, that was our card of the week, Seeker of the Way. So let's jump into our main topic this week. We, I think, have a fun topic. We're going to do a deep dive in. And so, what this is for you listeners at home is this is when we talk about a specific deck or archetype or even a card. We kind of just want to single out one thing, and we just want to dive as deep into it as possible and try to cover as much of it as we can for you guys. So this week, our deep dive in is going to be Delver, the archetype. We want to try to cover everything we possibly can about the Delver archetype in the next 45 minutes. So hold on to your seats, boys and girls. So
I mean, we want to cover I think it's one of the most relevant cards in the format. I feel like learning just about this card can cover like up to half of the format at times. Like at least what you're going to be sitting across the table from.
Yeah. I mean, it's Delver decks are probably the best decks in the format. And then even within the archetype Delver, there are multiple different strategies that you can play from. But at its core, Delver is a tempo deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like tempo decks, especially Delver, they can go one or two ways. You can either be like tempo aggro or you can be tempo control. So a lot of it, I think, is matchup dependent, but
you're talking about within the
also,
same deck. You
within
can
the
play
same,
both ways.
Yeah, within the same deck or within the same archetype, you could take mono blue Delver, and I think you could build it to be more aggro, or you could build it to be more control. But then at the same time, you can even change that role within the deck. I don't know. What do you think about that? What do you think about what kind of deck is Delver? What is this deck doing?
It wants to get ahead early. Of course, like that's what Delver does. It's the most aggressive 1-drop, especially in blue. So you get ahead and then you say no as long as you can until like they should be pretty low if you can say no long enough. So it's combining just stop them, and you're able to do these other things. And it's there's some decks that don't spend that time. What am I trying to say here? It's how they spend their time. Like they can like kill your creatures, or they can like fill their hand with more counter spells. But they have the spare mana to do it, and I feel like that's what defines your version of the Delver deck.
Okay. So what do you think about the deck being able to take on different roles? Like, so like they're all tempo decks, right, at their core.
Mhm.
Then I don't know. Do you feel like it's more of an aggro deck? Do you feel like it's more of a control tempo deck?
Well, I feel like that's what tempo is in blue. Is it's that mix. It's just like play 1 and 2 drop spells because that's what you know you're going to have mana for, and it mixes it like it's hard to say like which it is because it's both. Like it really does control your opponent. I've played against Delver where I never get to resolve a spell because they get a ninja and then they're just filling their hand. They're cycling spell sorter sprites and bouncing them back to their hand, and then it's just counter spell to fill the gaps. And so they can feel just like a big control deck in just how many counter spells they have. But like it's also building a machine most of the time when like especially when you're mono blue and you have that ninja.
And that's kind of like what tempo is, right? It's kind of like a machine. Like you're slowly just starting, like trying to get your wheels turning and the cogs rolling, until you finally just, get that card advantage engine or like uh, that more virtual card advantage. I think more than anything, it's just those small incremental, just little advantage, little advantage, little advantage, and then your opponent's dead.
I think that's a result of like how much mana you plan on having in a game. Like I think that's planning to play with 3. Like you have to develop incremental advantage because you can't play a 3 mana draw spell. Like you need to be able to do multiple things in a turn. Like get that threat out there so the game does end because you're not going to grind them out completely. Like part of most of these Delver decks is you got to know when to let them resolve that spell because you need to save that counter spell, or you might be able to deal with it later. You can go around it, fly over it.
Yeah, all good points, I think. So let's kind of jump in now to the variations of this deck. We've kind of touched on what this deck is aiming to do, what its core strategy is in its tempo. It's a tempo deck that takes on an aggro or control role. But let's talk about some of the different variants within this archetype. Let's talk about what I think is probably the best version of the deck for the meta, and that is mono blue.
Why do you think it's the best version? At least for the meta. Why specifically just for the meta and not just like this is the best version of the deck?
I think I misspoke.
Okay.
Actually. So mono blue, I think, is the best version for the Delver Mirror. I had my stuff backwards. So I think that mono blue is the best version of the deck for the Delver Mirror. I think that the Scred version of the deck is the best deck for the meta. I think that the Scred version is more well placed against the rest of the field. It has a better positioning, I guess, if that makes sense. But I think that mono blue has a slight edge against Scred. Despite that, the Scred version has access to lightning bolts and Screds and stuff like that, I just think that the mono blue version takes advantage of tempo better.
Yeah, because it's the purest. It's just blue, and you're not trying to like deal with stuff in play. You're just like I feel like it has the best plan of most of these Delver decks that I'm looking at. That like yeah, the creatures just come out 1, 2, 3, or if they don't, then they're holding up a counterspell, and they don't have to spend any time looking for mana. It's just they get the most of those incremental advantages that we were talking about because they get to cast their preordains and their ponders when the other decks are looking for that, like cycling Ash Barrens. That's not a huge difference, but that's the small difference that I feel like makes that probably the fastest.
Yeah, and I think that kind of hits it. Is it's never fiddling around with its mana. It's never wasting turns and lands to, cycle on Ash Barrens to get your red source, or sacrificing and evolving wilds and having your land coming into play tapped. So it is probably the fastest, and it just is very smooth. And I think it just does what the blue red version is trying to do, but just better and more consistently. Um, but for those of you who are a little unfamiliar with Delver, maybe you're newer to the format, or you just haven't had a lot of experience playing against Delver deck. Let's sort of talk about the core foundations of this mono blue deck. And I think you kind of hit on it. And the first big one is 17 basic islands.
And you can even cram in like a quicksand or something. I've seen that, spicy, but maybe not great. Like a lot of these play Daze and Gush, and I think being able to consistently cast Counterspell on turn 2 and not having to, find that land, or you found a land and it's a mountain, and your Counterspell kind of looks silly there when the other deck would have, both of them could have Stutter Sprite up for that mana, but one's gonna have the option of also playing Counterspell.
Yeah, so the mana in the deck is just very smooth, very consistent. You do have those options, like you were saying, like playing Quicksand or something. Personally, I think that the deck is better with just islands, for all the reasons that you touched on. What about the spell suite of the deck? What is kind of the core, the spell suite, the instants, the sorceries? How is this deck, I guess, trying to get that advantage?
I just want to bring up a list real quick before okay. They all run that Gush. Well, most of them run that Gush. But it can also, like, the Daze, I feel like it's pretty huge. I feel like it can really save you, and like being able to just the extra islands just make Daze so good. And the whole deck is not more than, you can cast everything for under 2, or pretty much everything in the deck you can cast for under 2. So Gush just gains value. They all play Counterspell, so I don't think that's a big difference. But just extra Ponderous Preordains. I don't believe, does Blue Red play? Oh, they do play the 4 Ponderous for Preordains. I thought some of them were cutting, but you also have access to, I feel like no other versions run Snap. Do you have any ideas why other versions wouldn't play Snap and the mono blue would get to?
I think that has to do with just space. The mono blue decks are removal light. Like, they don't really have removal. So it's either like you're playing some number of snaps, or you're playing some number of vapor snags, or like a mix of both. And I think that the other versions of the decks are playing Lightning Bolt and Scred instead,
Yeah, the Vapor Snag I feel like is pretty good. That card is gas.
I like Vapor Snag quite a bit.
But I think Logic Knot is a big difference. Like, you have the blue to just be able to be like, yeah, just 1 extra copies of Counterspell. I don't know what my favorite suite for the instance in the deck is. I feel like what sets it apart a lot is the sideboard. I really don't like mono blue's sideboard.
Yeah, I think that blue in general might be one of the weakest colors for sideboards. They have access to Hydroblast, which in the right matchups is sort of like a powerhouse, one of those powerhouse cards. But everything else is just very lackluster. The other big kind of boom in the sideboard is like Stormbound Geist, but the blue-red version can also play that.
And we're not seeing that many Chainer's Edicts, and that's when that card shines, is when there's Edict effects, and we're just not seeing very many. I don't think it's a card you have to devote I don't think you have to devote that many cards in your sideboard to that, but you see the mono blue sideboards just running it anyway.
And I think that is a homage to the power level of blue in general for sideboards, and that there's not a lot of great options. And Stormbound Geist is a powerful card in a lot of scenarios. It shines the most when Edict effects are prevalent in the format, but it's still one of those cards that if you need to be the bigger control deck or the mid-range deck in a matchup, you can side it in and sort of try to grind your opponent out with it.
Yeah, that's why it is good in the mirror. Just block all those weenies and
yeah,
it just never dies.
It eats Delver and comes back bigger. So great in the mirror, I think. Let's talk a bit about the creatures of the deck. Do you want to
just want to start with any? Because, well, okay. So first, there's of course Delver of Secrets. And I don't think we have to talk anymore about him. But then there's the fairy package. There's Fairy Miscreant, which is 1 blue for a 1/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another Fairy Miscreant, you draw a card. I think it's easily the second best blue 1-drop. And they're just going to play number 1 or number 2 in their deck, and it enables Spellstutter Sprite. And Spellstutter Sprite is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 with flying, and it has flash. And when it enters, you counter target spell, which is not a May, which is kind of important sometimes, where X is the converted mana cost of your fairies or less. And so it's a counter spell on a creature. I think that's kind of why we play Miscreant, other than it helps that ninja. Speaking of ninja, that card kind of ties the whole, it goes, you almost always play it with that fairy package, because bouncing either of those when they can get value, that's your engine. Like that right there. Ninja of the Deep Hours is your engine. Mono blue gets to play the Spire Golem, which is just great with ninja and enough lands in play, and it blocks every creature in other Delver decks beautifully. They have to burn a Scred to get rid of this creature most of the time, and it's just the synergies. You can feel the synergies with all of the creatures.
Yeah. So Spire Golem is a 2/4 flying artifact creature golem for 6. Costs 6 generic mana to cast, which kind of seems out of the question, but it has another line of text that says Affinity for Islands. So realistically, this card is a 3-drop in the deck, and then sometimes less, depending on how many lands you have. 3 is the earliest that you can bring it down, though. So.
Yeah, but then at turn 4, it's already a 2-mana 2/4 with flying that feels so good to be able to drop that 2/4 and then hold up counterspell. That just stabilizes you a lot of the time. It also has evasion like every other creature in your deck. So if you need to get a ninja in with it, it always can. So just evasion all over the place, and you're just cheating on mana, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think that Spire Golem is really what sets the mono blue creature base apart from the other versions of the Delver deck. Scred can't play it because, the mountains. It's just not as reliable to cast it efficiently. And I feel like Spire Golem, because it can let you cheat on mana, like you said, can hold up counterspell, spell search, sprite, whatever. It also goes really well with cards like Ninja the Deep Hours, Snap. I just forgot the name of the card. Vapor Snag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That card name just eluded me. But so like you can sequence it where you turn 3, make a Spire Golem, untap, attack with it. Because of flying, it's hard to block. Then you ninja your ninjutsu, your ninja the deep hours into play, draw your card, and then make your 4th land drop and cast your Spire Golem again. And now you've basically you kind of gave your Spire Golem pseudo vigilance. You drew a card, and you blanked your opponent's next combat step.
The biggest one of the biggest drawbacks to Spire Golem, I think, is that it just dies to artifact hate, and it's so good that I bring in artifact hate against it. Like if you have Gleeful Sabotage in your deck and you're playing against Delver and it's mono blue, just like it feels so good. Like in green, you're not going to be like, oh, I already used some removal on one of their Spire Golems. No, their Spire Golem is just going to sit there until you kill it, and it's going to peck in at you because you probably don't have reach, and then you can blow it up. Like that's always the trade-off with artifacts tend to do some broken things with they tend to they make themselves cost less, and they can feel kind of cheaty. But there's always this backdoor of then you board against it and it becomes fine. It's also, I feel like against the mono blue version, it's also worth it to bring in an artifact hate because since their sideboard is so bad, a lot of people go reaching for the colorless hate or like serrated arrows or what is it? Relic of Progenitus, spontaneous mutation, aura. What is it? I can't remember what it's called. It's a 3-mana enchantment that makes all auras. You have to pay 2 more at the beginning of each upkeep. So you can bring in your artifact and enchantment hate against mono blue weirdly enough, and it feels good.
Yeah, that's what I've always found too, playing against the deck. Spire Golem is just such a powerful card that you have to have a way to answer it.
And not to mention if they have a Bone Splitter, which is not that
common, but it does come up. And when they put a Bone Splitter on their Spire Golem, you're dead as a doornail, Smalls.
Yeah, it's a 4/4 in the air. Nothing fights that. You got to stack block. It doesn't feel good. And put it on that Stormbound Geist. Bone Splitter used to be a regular one of in these decks, and it is interesting we're not seeing it anymore. I think that's just I don't know specifically why, but I think it's just not required. There's not as much affinity or something.
Yeah, I am really not sure. So that's mono blue. Kind of broke down that deck a little bit. Now it's kind of want to transition over and we talk about the Scred version of the deck, which is very similar to mono blue, but then has some glaring differences. And I think I want to start with the land base again. Sean, do you kind of want to talk to us about the differences in the mana base here?
For one, you're playing snow-covered islands instead of islands. I've seen people say that you should be playing snow-covered islands even if you don't have Scred in your deck because you're faking to be Scred Delver and they can play differently. I don't buy into that because there are cards in the format that care. It's not huge. They're usually land destruction cards or something weird like that. But that's one big difference is you're playing snow-covereds. You got 2 mountains, which if you're not afraid of land destruction, when I look at this sideboard, I kind of just get flashbacks of brewing decks where I only have one of a source or something like that, and then I come across that land destruction deck and it's just painful because I completely get shut off from some of my cards. But I don't think that this deck cares. It has too much protection, and so it gets to play I have seen a list with only one mountain, and I respect that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm brave enough to try one mountain in my Scred Delver deck, but I think that you're right. I don't know that this deck cares about the land destruction. It can function without the mountain, but at the same time, like, it's got enough protection that, you know, maybe you'll blow someone out sometime when they don't see it coming, and you'll, you know, be able to molten rain their mountain or whatever, blow up their mountain. But I think those scenarios are few and far between. But the last big thing about this sideboard or land base, besides the there's usually 2 to 3 copies of Evolving Wilds. But the biggest thing about this, and it's one of my favorite things about the land base, because I think this card is just phenomenal, and that's Ash Barrens. Like, this card has revolutionized mana bases within the Pauper format. So Ash Barrens, for you guys listening at home, is a land. It comes into play untapped. You can tap it to add 1 generic to your mana pool, but it has basic land cycling 1. So you pay 1 generic, you discard it, you search your library for a basic land, you reveal it, you put it in your hand.
Instant speed.
Instant speed. So you can do this on your opponent's end step. You can do this on your main phase, which is nice. It's sort of a step up from that Evolving Wilds, right? Because you can do it in your main phase. Like, I really need red mana on my main phase, so I'm gonna tap my island, go get my mountain, play my mountain that turn, make my land drop, and then, you know, do what I needed to do.
Yeah, and you can a lot of the time be mana neutral and have fixture colors. Like, there's not a lot of situations where Ash Barrens feels bad, and the shuffle effects on these lands help your what's it called? Your cantrip effects. So I think that's a big draw to play this basic land package.
Yeah. So even though it's not as lean and consistent as the mono blue version, it's still really good. Like, it's not an awful mana base because of Ash Barrens, and so that allows us to, you know, play more powerful spells in our deck. It allows us to get that second color,
and they're better than the tap lands that gain you a life, because they're always finding a basic that's a snow covered so that your Scred is going to grow.
Yeah, and let's kind of move into the instances, sorceries of the deck, that spell suite. And let's start with Scred. This is kind of the namesake card of the deck. So Scred is a single red mana for an instant, deals damage to target creature equal to the number of snow permanents you control. So that's now apparent why we're playing all these snow-covered lands. But Sean, can you kind of just touch on the power level of this card? Like, what has this card done for Delver decks?
So the power level of Scred is like 10. Like, you don't have to play Flame Slash. I think it's a
5 out of 7. Perfect score. 5 out of 7.
I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest, but
oh, you don't? Okay, never mind. It's a meme or whatever. Anyway,
I put my head underground for like the past 20 years, so I don't know anything about nothing. But just Scred lets the deck kill huge creatures. It doesn't have to like bounce them and try to be tricky and then try to counter them or something. It's just like 1 mana, deal a crap ton of damage. I can't say enough about Scred. Like, I feel like it makes certain creatures unplayable. Like, not unplayable, but like 1 mana, kill a Gurmag Angler? That's a realistic thing at instant speed. Like, I don't know what more I can say about it, but Scred is the truth.
The prophecy is real. So I think that Scred allows these Delver decks to play a really strong mid-range control game that most Delver decks in the past can't really do as well. They can kind of be on the tempo control plan, but Scred just kind of gives the deck that reach. Like, it just removes things that are otherwise unremovable for decks like this. They don't have to try to be fancy and like race it with a flyer and bouncing it and whatever. They just 1 mana, your guy's dead, take a bunch of damage.
It makes sequencing easier, because you can have a turn where you're like, you know what, I think he's going to play creatures this turn. I think I'm going to play my creatures first, and then I can, clean up one, and then just make sure he doesn't. Well, then I'll have counterspells up forever, and I'm already ahead. Like, it doesn't. You don't have to hold it up. You can let it happen. You can hold on to your counterspell, and if the creature becomes a problem, Scred it.
I feel like Scred it. Just Scred it. Just Scred it.
Hashtag Scred it.
Those pesky Gurmag anglers. Hashtag Scred it away. I feel like that's a commercial with like a big bald guy in a white t-shirt. Scred.
It's not Mr. Clean. It's like,
no, it's Scred. I don't know. Okay. We've derailed this enough already, so. But I lost my train of thought. I had a great thought, and then you said Scred it, and I was
talking about this, how it makes the sequencing easier, if that helps you come back to you at all.
No. You said Scred it, and my ADHD just ran wild. Oh man!
So do we want to talk about? We can talk about the difference in the creatures. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. So, what's the biggest difference in the creature package?
One difference: you take your 4 Spire Golems and you replace them with 4 Augur of Bolas, and you're done.
Wow. and Augur of Bolas, I think, helps play into the mid-range aspect of this deck. It's a good blocker. Not a lot of little guys are getting past it, and it replaces itself. It cantrips, essentially. It gets you another spell deeper into your deck, and sort of helps transition you into the mid to late game from the early game.
Yeah, it makes it so Augur makes it so there's even more creatures that you can let resolve. You have your counterspell up, you can let it resolve. I have an Augur of Bolas in my hand. It doesn't matter. This will block. It can hold 4 creatures back because they all have 1 toughness and they're not willing to make trades yet. So it further narrows the things you care about. And if you'll notice, it also works really well with Ninja of the Deep Hours, which I feel like is kind of the theme of the deck. It's just like, if you play Ninja and it starts going, you just win because you're so far ahead.
Yeah, and that's sort of the recurring theme, from the mono blue list that we talked about to the Scred version. Ninja of the Deep Hours is that engine. It's the machine that keeps this deck going. There have been popping up, and I kind of want to touch on it a little bit, but there have been popping up lately decks that are taking out the Ninja of the Deep Hours, and they're playing cards like Muldrifter.
I have heard rumor. I was just watching a 420 Dragon video. He plays a lot of familiars really well, and he was playing against a Delver deck, hence the reason why I was watching the video. And he was talking about a list that took out the fairy package. And I don't know if do you keep in the Ninja if you don't have the fairies? Like,
yeah, I don't know that I would. I want to say that the list that I'm talking about that I've seen, and I've seen a couple, but I want to say that they didn't have the full fairy package. Like they didn't have the miscreant. They just had spellster sprites, and they didn't have Ninja the Deep Hours. They had 4 Mole Drifters. I'm trying to remember what they had in place of the miscreants, but
I would say that the Mole Drifter might be a concession to just this card's good against Delver, and like it holds back most of their creatures, and you just next level them, play like basically do what the mono blue, like the reason you like the mono blue version is because it's just going for its thing. Putting in Mole Drifter is just that to the next level. Just like my creature outclasses yours, and now I'm miles ahead.
Okay. So maybe just kind of a concession to the fact that mono blue Delver is such a prevalent presence in the format. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. I'm not sure how great I feel about it. I feel like just the synergy between the fairies and the Ninja the Deep Hours is just so great that that's sort of what I want to be doing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
All right. Well, let's maybe touch on the sideboard a little bit, because in addition to cards like Scred and Lightning Bolt for the main deck, Red also gives us access to some of the best sideboard cards in the format.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you probably know the card I'm talking about, right?
No.
There's actually 2. Yeah. It's between the Gorilla Shaman and the Pyroblast.
Mm-hmm.
So those cards are just they're those powerhouse sideboard cards that you bring them in, and they're gonna do work.
Gorilla Shaman's just like if you're playing Affinity, you're done. If you're not already ahead, I win. And then Pyroblast. It feels weird having so many of them when you only have just a couple of mountains, but it just works anyway. Because you don't have to have it up at the time. You let them resolve something, and then you're just like, hey, I'm gonna kill your ninja. That's fine. I don't care. Ninja, by the way, important note, is uncounterable when you're ninjutsuing it. So Pyroblast gets extra mileage in that you don't have to counter it. You just don't care. Let it resolve, then deal with it. It is awkward because it loses to Spellstutter Sprite, but that's never stopped it from being good when I've played it. I think maybe so. The card, well, another red card we haven't talked about in their board is Electrickery, which is 1 red mana or 1 red and a colorless, and it deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control, or if you pay that 2 mana cost, it does
the overload.
The overload cost. It does 1 damage to each creature that you don't control. It gives you some game against Boggles in that you can actually hit some creatures. It sweeps the board, which is pretty tough for people to do in Pauper or to recover from. Like you can hit elves with it, you can hit tokens. There's plenty of targets for Electrickery. It's one of the reasons I play a lot of red decks. Like just I've seen people main deck Electrickery. It's just that good. The last. Yeah. So do you have anything to say about Electrickery?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about Electrickery, but I'll try to keep it brief. But I said earlier that I think mono blue is the favorite in the mirror match. I think that is true game 1, but I think games 2 and 3, things might be slightly in the favor of the Scred decks because of cards like Pyroblast and especially because of Electrickery. They're just all those 1/1s. You can pick off a Delver, before it flips. You can kill all their Spellstutter Sprites, all their Fairy Miscreants. It's just one of those cards. It's very narrow. You don't want to bring it in every matchup, but the matchups you bring it in, it's going to be a powerhouse. It's going to put you so far ahead that it's just a good card. It's good.
Yeah, just catch back
when
up.
You can't scred it, so you electrickery it. I don't know.
The last card that's different is Swirling Sandstorm, which is I love this card. So it's 3 generic and a red, so 4 total, and it's a sorcery, and it has Threshold. So if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it will do 5 damage to each creature without flying. But if you don't have 7 cards in your graveyard, it does nothing at all, which is super cool. I love just the way this card works. It makes for fun games, in my opinion. So since it does damage to each creature without flying, it's not good against the mirror or anything. But I think you're already like, I have 8 cards I want to bring against the mirror, so I think we're fine on that front. But Swirling Sandstorm covers like almost the rest of the format. You do have to work for it a little bit, but your Ash Barrens and your Evolving Wilds definitely help you with that. Your cantrips help you with that. And it happens pretty quick most of the time where you get those 7 cards. And when you're just like, okay, Swirling Sandstorm, I don't know. I'm always just on Angler of just like sweep your Anglers. It's great against Affinity because you can get behind. They have all these 4/4s. Sweep those, and it never hits your own creatures. I believe it will kill your ninjas and your augurs. That's a small price to pay for wiping your opponent's field.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else you want to kind of touch on with the sideboard or with the Scred deck?
Not really. I think this is my preferred way to play Delver.
Yeah, I think I agree. So let's talk about the last sort of variant of Delver. This is a lot less common. I've not seen very many deck lists, but
yeah, it's kind of a fringe, like spicy brew type of thing.
Yeah, and this is the we're referring to the blue-black Gurmag Delver lists, which they're taking out the red.
Alchemy sometimes. A lot of the times people will play Forbidden Alchemy to fill their graveyard and stuff.
Yeah. So this deck is definitely... It doesn't feel like a Delver of Secrets deck. It's playing, big spells like Forbidden Alchemy, Gurmag Angler, Edict effects.
Sultai Scavenger on occasion.
Sultai Scavenger, has made an appearance or two. So
it's mostly in brew territory, I want to say, but I think it's good enough to touch on it just a bit. It has the most removal. It's definitely this is the version of Delver that's built for control that we were talking about at the start of the show, like where you can build your deck for tempo and speed, or you can kind of go over to this end of the spectrum where you're going to get more cards and stuff. It's not incremental. I guess it is incremental when you're getting back, or when you're recasting like Forbidden Alchemy and stuff, but it's mostly I feel like it's mostly big spells and like getting value with your or your anglers and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely the go big version. I don't have a lot of experience, and I've only seen a few deck lists, but I think it definitely is in that brew territory where no one's really found the just that sweet spot with the deck. But
yeah, it does suffer from the removal in the format being too good, and a lot of the time you can't keep stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's move along then. Sort of our the last thing we want to touch on with this archetype or with this deep dive in are the keys to success. So if you take this deck into a Pauper Challenge or a Pauper League, what are the things you're going to need to do to be successful, to win those matches, to gain those advantages that you need? So, Sean, what do you think? What do you think are some keys to success when playing Delver?
I think there is one key to success for the deck, and everything else feeds into it. To me, that's sequencing. Like, if you know your matchups, you're gonna know, yeah, okay, maybe I need to pop this, go for this preordain right now, and I can't get out my Fairy Miscreant because I need a counterspell so badly. They're gonna run away with this game if they resolve a spell on turn 2. Or okay, maybe it's time to just play out because I know that they're gonna have a dead turn, or like they're gonna spend their turn cycling through cards. But when you lose, it's because most of the time it's not because of what you drew. That can play into it, but it's like you can't help that. So I think it's, know which cards to play in which order to get the most value while not letting your opponent run away with the game.
Yeah. And we have a few bullets kind of in our show notes, and all of these things that we've talked about feed into sequencing, just like you've said. And that first big one is knowing your matchups and knowing the interactions. If you're not familiar with the matchup, it's going to be really hard for you to sequence your spells. And so,
yeah, like with the matchups, like Affinity, most of the time you want to counter the 4/4s. Like against Boggles, you got to know, okay, do I have enough counter spells to just stop all of the little creatures, or am I going for the Ancestral Masks and the Ethereal Armors? I think that just, you got to really know, like, matchups really are everything for this deck. It matters what order you play your cards in. You have to go fast against Tron. And just knowledge pays off for this deck, like in spades.
Yeah, and that also feeds into what we've talked about. Throughout the show, we've been talking about the different roles that these Delver decks can take. And knowing your matchups and knowing your role within a given matchup is going to play a huge part in how you sequence your spells as well.
Like, you can know whether to play out all your guys because you got to get them dead before X turn. And that most of the time you're trying to do that anyway, but once you know, okay, we're kicking it into high gear, maybe the Spell Stutter is better as a repeatable 1-mana damage source. And that what your role is from the matchup. So I think knowing the format is going to pay off if you're looking to play this deck.
Yeah, I think that is 100% the greatest key to success when you're playing Delver. This isn't one of those decks that you can just, this is my first time playing the format. I grabbed Scred Delver and I went in 5-0 to League. Maybe you can, but this is the deck that the more you know, the better off you are. Knowledge is your most powerful weapon with this deck. So, and then sort of the last thing that we wanted to talk about was prioritizing those resources. Because most of the time, these Delver decks don't have a lot of card advantage. They do have that engine of Fairy Miscreant, Ninja the Deep Hour, Spell Stutter Sprite. That engine is a form of card advantage for this deck, but a lot of the other cards in the deck, like Augur Bolus, that's just a cantrip effect. Your other cantrips are just card selection, not actual card advantage. And then Gush is a big form of card advantage for the deck. but it sets you back because you have to return 2 islands to your hand, which can sometimes you don't always want to, like, I need my mana, but like I need to use this gush. And so
I feel like gush is the ultimate question of prioritizing resources.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
I think another resource I would I think it's important to think about is how many copies of Counterspell are there in your deck? Can you afford to keep them off of casting this type of spell the entire game? I've brewed. This is where I feel like it was most important, and maybe it's irrelevant because it was a brew, but I feel like it's at least interesting. So I brewed a deck where you played Corrupt, Pestilence, and like Consume Spirit to just like you control the game and then you just knock them down for 9 or 10. And the way I actually ended up playing against Delver was, okay, corrupt you for 9. And they're like, okay, counterspell. And I'm like, okay, 1 down. Corrupt you again. Okay, there's another one, 1 down. And I just wore them out. And if they ever tried to like counterspell something to like protect one of their creatures or something, I was just leaping for joy because they countered the wrong thing. And they thought something that mattered, and I really didn't care. I was just using my mana effectively.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm probably like what you're talking about, because we've played the Blue-Red Delver Corrupt Mono Black control matchup a dozen times, and I always feel like I'm walking on eggshells with like, what do I counter? When do I save my creatures? Like
you got to worry about it, and I feel like that also, like with Tron lists, I feel like it's super relevant too. Of like, are they going to just build the machine if I don't copy this Ghostly Flicker? Which that's probably a pretty good target. You should probably counter that Ghostly Flicker, but maybe you can't counter it, and you countered like something unimportant, a crop rotation or something, because you want to keep them off of their resources. It's so many judgment calls. That's why Delver's so much fun. I feel like is you look at a hand and there are 3 lines of play, and then those could branch depending on what you draw, and then you look at cards and you don't know which ones to go on top. And so I feel like this is like a deck that is better in the hand of an expert.
Yeah. You for sure need your practice. You need to know those matchups. You need to understand how you're sequencing your spells. And that is all going to come down to the matchup you're in, the role you need to play, what resources you have access to, how many lands do you have this game? Can I afford to gush? Do I need to counter this, or can I ignore it for a minute and then use a removal spell on it later and save my counter spell? These are all things that you need to know and that you need to be assessing as the game goes. And these can change in the middle of a match. I was saving my counter spell for X because I can use a removal spell on this guy. But then maybe that changes and it's like, well, I need to now counter his second copy of it, or I don't know. There's just so many variables that play into it. And so trying to have as much knowledge as you can possibly get.
And I feel like the only way to get that knowledge is playing games. Play against as many opponents as you can with different play styles. I feel like MTGO is the best way to do that, because this isn't a deck you can goldfish and really learn much. Like you can learn basic things, but you're not gonna know you're not gonna know the weird little things like Spell Stutter Sprite can end up countering your own spell in a fight if they counter their own spell, and it's that doesn't have any valid targets except your lightning bolt on the stack anymore, and you may end up having to use your other lightning bolt to kill your own guy. I know I've just constructed a scenario where 7 spells were cast, but like it's those little things that I feel like you want to be an expert in this deck. You got to learn them. You got to play some weird scenarios, and you're only going to get that on game 1,000.
Yeah. Can't stress it enough. Put the time in, and play other decks too. At least for me, when I'm trying to learn a format or an archetype, I play it. I play that deck. I feel like you can learn more about the deck playing it than you can playing against it. Because when you're sitting in that other chair and you're understanding, what is important, sometimes from the opposite point of view, you see something and you think it's what's relevant, but it's really not what's relevant. And so getting into that other seat and seeing that different point of view is going to help you too. So, but yeah, just play your little hearts out.
Just keep playing, play a different deck, play against the deck. Because this is one of my least played decks. I have most of the format built, but I don't have the snow-covered islands because I kind of worked my way backwards. I'm working my way backwards. I play less popular decks, and then I play the more popular decks later. And sitting on the other side of Delver, it just feels like all they have in their hand is counter spells. And then you play Delver and you're like, crap, I gotta find some counter spells.
Yeah. This deck is one of my favorites. I love playing this deck. When you get into that groove and when you feel like you have a really just deep understanding of the matchup, you almost feel unbeatable. So, well, anyway, that was our deep dive in for Delver. I'm sure that we missed a ton. I'm sure that there was a lot that we didn't get covered that could have been covered. It's just such a vast archetype. There's just so much that goes into it. But anyway, hopefully that was beneficial to you guys at home. If you're thinking about picking up this deck, go for it. It's a blast to play. It's powerful. It's strong. But just learn everything you can about the deck. Learn everything you can about your meta and your matchups, and you'll be able to be successful with this deck. So let's move on. Let's jump into our Pauper Challenge breakdown. This was the Pauper Challenge results posted on the 4th, so yesterday, as of the recording of this show. And this was an interesting top 8, in my opinion. Our first place deck, not one that I'm surprised to see at the top of a bracket. We've got Marasa-tron.
Yeah, no Dinrova Horror. We're just going with Pulse of Marasa, trying to win with Rolling Thunder, and it got there.
One Rolling Thunder. Interesting, though, this deck only has one Pulse of Marasa, whereas most lists have 2. And there's not a second copy in the sideboard.
Yeah, I think it's just got its own thing that it wants to do, and it would rather have other control-y cards to prevent them from being able to win. And I think that's what its priority's on.
Yeah. It does have just one copy of Exclude. It kind of has diversified its counterspell suite. So they've got 3 copies of Condescend, 1 Essence Scatter, 1 Exclude, and then 1 copy of Prohibit. I feel like the Essence Scatter is usually just another copy of Exclude. But I guess this was sort of a concession to probably the speed of the format right now with decks like Stompy and Delver. And
well, I think the format has been slowing down a little bit, but I don't think that I don't think that having to exclude is anywhere near as powerful as um, having a exclude and a 1 mana less counter spell that can hit a creature. Because a lot of the time that you're going in mystical teachings, you're stretching your mana. Even in Tron, a lot of the time you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna tap my what's it called, painted bluffs, or like whatever land you have that you can filter one into to change the mana color, and you end up spending a lot of mana. So I think that having just the diversity is, I think, the better idea.
Yeah, and mystical teachings and forbidden alchemy kind of create this toolbox effect with the deck. So I think you're right. Diversifying your answers in a deck where you can search up specific answers is relevant.
Yeah. The only other thing I would note on this is it does have a kind of a strange sideboard. Not strange as in like bad at all. I really kind of like, I like most of these cards. Yeah. So they have like Coalition Honor Guard, which is a 2/4 standard bearer for 4 mana. So if somebody had,
sorry, you finish.
Yeah, if somebody targets a creature, they have to target standard bearer or a standard bearer or a flag bearer. That's what it's called. Standard bearer is the 2 mana version. They have to target a flag bearer, or they can't cast the spell. So like cartouches get around that, but it'll just shut down boggles. And then you were going to talk about Stonehorn Dignitary. Are you familiar with this card?
I am a little bit, but I feel like this is the other like oddball in the sideboard. So Stonehorn Dignitary is a 3 and a white for a 1/4. And when Stonehorn Dignitary enters the battlefield, target opponent skips his or her next combat phase. So it's kind of just like an extra copy of Moments Piece attached to a 1/4.
Yeah,
that you can ghostly
flicker.
Yeah. So I think the card is pretty neat.
It's very strong. It is deceptively strong, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah. Is it common in sideboards? I feel like I've never seen it. But
no, it's not. It's common in brews.
Alrighty. Well, anything else you want to touch on with this deck list?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our second place deck and speak of the Delver.
Yeah, is it Delver? Or not? Yeah, it's Scred Delver.
Scred Delver. Is it Delver? It is Delver. It is.
That was a bad joke. I don't like is it jokes. I feel like we've talked this deck to death, so it got second place.
Yep, second place deck, Delver, not surprising. Third place deck, speak of the Delver. This is a Scred Delver again. There are a few differences. This one has a Brainstorm in the main deck. It's not playing. Oh, never mind. The other copy has 2 copies of Brainstorm in the main deck. This version has 1 copy, and it's playing two Gush. This one's playing 2 Gush. What's the difference here?
1 cut of Preordain.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Yep, so that's the difference. 1 cut of Preordain for a second Brainstorm. Other than that, deck lists look exactly the same, except for this third place deck has 2 Evolving Wilds and 10 Snow-Covered Islands, as opposed to 3 Evolving Wilds and 9 Snow-Covered Islands. And then the sideboards are a little different.
1 has Shattering Pulse, the 2 mana instant spell that destroys an artifact, and it has buyback for 3. I think that's greedy.
Yeah. What better options exist that they could play in front of this besides just more Gorilla Shamans?
Oh, besides more Gorilla Shamans?
I mean, more Gorilla Shamans is probably just the optimal choice, right?
I want to say yes. The only other thing I would say is like, what's it called? All the artifact destruction cards are so similar. It's not shrapnel blast. It's instant destroy target artifact. They take 3 damage.
Ah,
Brutally shatter. Breakificate.
Breakificate. Yeah, gosh darn it. Why can't I remember what that card is called? Oh, bugger me.
Angry smashing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. 1 in a red, instant, destroy target artifact, deal 3 damage to its controller. Which is probably better than Shattering Pulse, but I still just don't think it's better than Gorilla Shaman. I would just rather play more Gorilla Shamans. I don't know that you really care about the 3 damage. I would just rather be able to kill all their artifacts. Like, if I can answer all their artifacts, they're going to die eventually. And the extra 3 damage isn't going to matter.
Yeah, it's Shrapnel Blast. Or no, Smash to Smithereens. I said the wrong card again.
Smash to Smithereens. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Next deck?
Right. Next deck.
Oh, and they have Aura Flux.
Oh yeah, I like Aura Flux.
Yeah, good against enchantments.
Okay, 5 out of 7 would recommend. Okay, our 4th place list, Elves.
So what's been interesting is watching the different Elves decks play around with how many Lead the Stampede versus how many Distant Melodies they play. So this one has 1 Distant Melody, 4 Lead the Stampede, and notably a Viridian Longbow in the main deck.
Yeah, I think even more notable is the mana base.
Is it?
13 forests.
That's
They usually have the 1 island, right? That they use the bad elf to go fetch. Not Birchler Ranger. Birchler Ranger's the good elf. The 2 mana one.
Oh, I should just have my MTGO open. It's like
Sylvan Ranger?
Yeah.
Sylvan Ranger. So that guy, I'm gonna pull it up on Gatherer just to make sure.
I think not playing that island is what I'm leaning towards right now. It can really screw you up. It's good for a couple spells in your deck, and they're not even good until you're going off. And most of the time when you're going off, you have a Birchler Ranger.
Yeah. So yeah, it is Sylvan Ranger. So he's 1 in a green for a 1/1. When he enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand. I agree. I think that you can get away with playing the 1 copy of Distant Melody for when you go off. The Lead the Stampedes are great for building up to that point. And then when you start going off, Distant Melody just makes you so explosive and just so powerful. And you're going to get there with the Birchler Rangers, to make that mana.
So. I am surprised that they're not playing Wirewood Pride, because that's a pet card of mine for the Elves deck. Are you familiar with Wirewood Pride? For everyone that's not, it's 1 green mana, it's an instant, and it gives target creature +X/+X, where X is the number of elves you control. It doesn't give trample or anything, but when you have, usually, I don't know, even 6 elves, you just swing in, and 3 are going to get through, pump one of them huge, or save your own guy for a turn where it's going to matter that he's out, like save your Lissalana Huntmaster or something like that. And I guess they've opted not to play it, which they're the one who placed 4th in this tournament and not me, so I'm sure they know what they're doing. The only other thing I think that's worth talking about in this deck, well, at least that I want to bring up, is some cards in the sideboard. Are you ready to move to the sideboard?
Yeah.
So I've never even seen Luminescent Rain, so I'm going to read this.
That's the card that I have my cursor over right now reading.
Yeah, it's 2 generic and a green for an instant. says choose a creature type. You gain 2 life for each permanent you control of that type. So it's basically the strongest life gain card they can find.
Yeah. Does this deck have like a tough burn matchup?
You know, I mean, most of the time people just jam Well-Wisher in their deck and call it a day.
Well, he has 2 copies of Well-Wisher in his main deck, but
yeah, as well as some Essence Wardens. Which
there are Essence Wardens. Yeah,
a life, and I guess it's just he thought it was. I don't know if I
needed more life gain.
Yeah, is it better than a Well-Wisher?
I don't know. I almost would have possibly, gone up to maybe like 4 Gleeful Sabotage or something. I don't know. It's interesting, but I'm not quite sure that what its applications are, like where you've already got a lot of life gain spells. I don't know. Maybe the burn matchup is just close enough that you need a few more life gain spells. I really don't know. I don't play burn or elves at all. Like elves, I've got like 0 experience with. So
Penumbra Spider.
I like that card.
Even with 2 Spider Silk armor in the board already, is it just another concession to Delver? Yeah,
probably, but
I guess it is good against edict effects and stuff.
Yeah, it's good against edict effects. It's difficult to kill. I mean, it's probably not great against like mono blue Delver because they can just bounce it, snap it away and then attack through it and just tempo you out that way, and it costs 4 mana. But I think against the Scred Delver, having a 2/4 is relevant because they have to have a Scred for it. And then it makes another 2/4. So they've got to have 2 Screds for it. Otherwise, it's eating their Delvers. They just can't attack through it. It's like a big green Doom Blade against that deck.
Yeah, or they just stop attacking, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna play some elves.
Yeah, you're fine with that too, because you're just gonna make a big mungus board, and
big mungus,
get them. I don't know. Also, they have Viridian Longbow in the main deck and 1 more in the sideboard. So,
and that's pretty good against.
Yeah, I feel like they've got a lot against Delver. So,
then other than that, in the board, it's just 3 Gleeful Sabotage, 2 Serene Heart, which is just 1 and a green for instant speed. Destroy all local enchantments. What's a local enchantment, Brandon?
I think it means aura. What was the name of that card again?
Serene Heart. I'm frantically googling it. It says destroy all auras, but that's an Oracle text.
The Oracle is destroy all auras. So that's what I thought. Local enchantments are auras.
Yeah, and that will hit all. That'll hit all their abundant growths and enchant lands and stuff. So I love Serene Heart. It's the best enchantment specific thing that you can get. It doesn't even blow up your own Spider Silk armor. Cool, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, 5 out of 7 would do.
And then just Flaring Pain. They can make the red, and they don't want to die to Moment's Peace being cast over and over.
Yep, because that would be sort of the worst for them to combo off, attack, get Moment's Peace, and then have their Tron opponent, untap and electricity the board or just kill them.
Mm-hmm.
So they can kind of get them with that Flaring Pain. All right, 5th place. And this is just Boros Monarch.
Except it has Seeker of the Way in it.
Yeah, it has 3 copies of Seeker of the Way. Well, I think that Seeker of the Way has been making appearances in Boros Monarch.
This is kind of brewy. It has 3 Searing Blaze in it.
Yeah, that was the card that I was gonna get down to. Was the Searing Blazes are very interesting, especially because there's no Evolving Wilds. Like I feel like a card like Evolving Wilds would make Searing Blaze really good. But then at the same time, having a tapped land is probably not good when you're trying to play a double red spell on curve.
I think if you're playing Evolving Wilds, like you're just cracking it the same turn anyway, so it doesn't like you can't just hold on to it. Like that would just be worse than what they've got right now. Like as is, Glinthawk can get back an artifact land. Core Skyfisher can get back an artifact land or any of your prophetic prisms or things like that.
Yeah, this is true. So they do also have Boros Garrison, which bounces lands. So, and then there's always just the play an untapped land and cast Searing Blaze.
I didn't notice before, but instead of choosing between Prophetic Prism and Alchemist's Vial, this list is on 4 Prophetic Prism, 3 Alchemist's Vial. So it just says, why not both? Like I don't need any of those Battle Screeches in my deck. I'll just cast more of these cantrip artifact spells that give me value.
Yeah, how do you feel about that? I feel like Battle Screech is one of the reasons to play a deck like this.
I thought it always felt out of place in the Monarch version. Like it does help you with getting Monarch and like protecting it, but versions like this where I feel like it's getting more streamlined, more concise. Like the 2-mana artifacts have always felt good, and just maxing those out, like not maxing them out, but getting 7 in your deck, I think that's maybe the best that I like. I think I'm liking where this is going, and I would prefer to play a version like this.
Okay, interesting.
You didn't pop the Alchemist Vial much before anyway, right? Like you would when you had Monarch, but
yeah,
it was like 3 or 4 turns out. So maybe cutting down to 3 of those and saying Prophetic Prism makes Searing Blaze work because double red is hard and it's the better card.
Yeah. So notable cards out of the sideboard. And these are some of the things one of the things I like most about these Boros decks. Standard Bearer in the sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
I like that card. That's a good Magic card.
I think it's the best white sideboard card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there are 2 copies of Prismatic Strands. So this again is great when you're trying to be the Monarch and stay the Monarch. Mm-hmm. So this is an instant for 2 and a white. Prevent all damage that sources of the color of your choice would deal this turn, and it has flashback. Tap an untapped white creature you control.
There are all kinds of applications for this, like just it stops Izzet Blitz. It stops those Ninja of the Deep Hours from actually drawing their cards. Like Prismatic Strands just finds amazing ways to be good constantly.
Yeah, I like it. Some of the haymakers of the deck or the sideboard is like Molten Rain. There's Gorilla Shaman, Electrickery. But let's move on then to our 6th place deck. And speak of the Delver.
This is the mono blue.
Deck. Yes, it's the 3rd Delver deck of this top 8, but this one is mono blue.
Yeah, and it's going with 2 Logic Knots in kind of its flex instant spell slot, and then 4 Snap, which is more than usual.
Yeah,
that's certainly got some power.
Yeah, it is interesting. Pretty stock list. The sideboard.
It has Spontaneous Mutation.
Yeah,
he's kind of a non-bow with Logic Knot, but it's got to stop some pretty big creatures, or just Maybe it's just a 1-mana kill spell. Makes it worth it against just, I don't know, something they put Rancor on. You just laugh at them.
Yeah. What is that other one? It's a 1 and a hybrid white-blue. It's basically like a pacifism, I feel like. Do you know what I'm
Curse
talking
of
about?
Chains.
Curse of Chains. Yeah, I think that I prefer Curse of Chains.
Yeah.
Over this, but
the 1 mana is
both
the
are
difference.
fine. Yeah, the 1 mana and Flash. Curse of Chains.
Oh, it does have Flash.
So there are a few upsides to spontaneous mutation. And I don't know,
prefer the mutation.
Yeah. I actually, now that I'm looking at it, this card just might be better. Like, your graveyard fills up plenty fast. Realistically, you don't need it to be
more than 4 most of the time.
Yeah, like even if you have 1 to 2 cards in your graveyard, the spontaneous mutation is probably gonna, get rid of that. The only upside to Curse of Chains is that it is a pacifism. So that creature is just, it can't attack, it can't block. The creature with spontaneous mutation on can still block you, which could be relevant when you have to put it on a creature like a Spire Golem or a Gurmag Angler. It's not going to eat your creature in combat, but it's still just going to brick wall it. So that's sort of the upside.
But usually the reason you're not attacking is, well, there's a big creature and some rabble that I can probably trade with, but that big creature is making it so I can't attack. And I think it solves that.
Yeah, you can still attack into it and feel safe. So,
by the way, Curse of Chains is at the beginning of each upkeep, tap enchanted creature.
So, that's what it is. Okay.
Is that better or worse than pacifism?
I think it's about the same. I mean, it does the same thing. It removes the creature from combat, right?
That's a lame answer. I want to know if it's better or worse, Brandon.
I think for the sake of conversation, it's better because it has blue in its casting cost, so Delver can cast it.
Fine. Okay.
Otherwise, they're like literally the same. I don't know. Maybe there is an upside to tapping it at the beginning of each upkeep. But basically, the way it's going to work is like you're going to put it on the creature, and it's just going to be tapped forever. Yeah. Like we're going to get to that first upkeep, and it's going to tap, and then it's never going to untap again. So there's a little bit of upside on pacifism, whereas if you pacify a creature that has a tap ability, it's still going to use its tap ability every turn. Whereas this creature only gets to do it
Priest of Titania, then they're going to use it when it's awkward, and they can't really use a Priest of Titania. They don't have instants. So and then things like, it's mostly most of the activated abilities, let's be honest, they're on elves. So it's better on elves because maybe they have to tap their Timberwatch elf at the beginning of their upkeep. So there's a difference, but I still am in spontaneous mutation camp.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Are we moving on to 7th place?
Yeah.
Don't make me say it again. Speak of the Delver.
Yeah.
Our 4th Delver deck in this top 8. So this is a little out of the normal because I feel like this is the most polarized top 8 we've seen in a long time. It's usually 1-2 Delver decks, but I don't know that I've ever seen this many of a single deck in a top 8.
Yeah, there's 4.
That is much many.
But this is a spicier version of the mono blue version. Like it's got a flare husk instead of like a bone splitter or anything. Which do you think that the body's just that important?
Maybe. It's also a mana cheaper than Bone Splitter. No, it's
not. It's more. It's not. The equip cost is 1 more.
The equip cost is 1 more.
It gives a toughness, and it sacrifices a power, and it gets a body. So there's a bunch of trade-offs. But maybe making your flyers 2/2s and making your ninja 3/3 to beat through like enemy augurs. I could see that paying off.
I can see Flare Husk being better in the mirror. Make your creatures just slightly bigger than theirs so you can attack through them easier. But this deck also, the other thing that's interesting about it, so it's doing a split on Snap and Vapor Snag, which I do kind of like. But instead of like Logic Knot or something, it's playing a Deprive, which I kind of like that. I think I like that better than Logic Knot. It's more efficient, but at the same time,
it's not contingent on you having cards in your graveyard either.
Right, and so you can Deprive on turn 2. You really can't Deprive on, or really can't Logic Knot on turn 2 for more than like a Force Spike.
Yeah,
you know.
In that phase in the game, it's usually, Force Spike is as good as Counterspell in most cases, but most cases isn't all cases.
Yeah. So. The drawback to Deprive, though, so Deprive is blue for an instant, but as an additional cost, you have to return a land you control to your hand, to its owner's hand, and then you just counter target spell. It's just counterspell. In a deck that has Daze and Gush, and he's elected to just cut a Daze for a Deprive. So you're kind of...
You can only return so many islands to your hand.
Right. So sideboard, some of the weird ones.
One more thing. There's a couple more things about this deck that I want to talk about. So we talked about how he has an Augur of Bolas, but he's running Gitaxian Probe, which is kind of funny because I thought the Gitaxian Probe would come up in the version with Logic Knot, but no. Yeah, that's the thing I wanted to talk about other than that. What the?
Yeah, he's got... So looking at his sideboard, he's got some interesting ones.
One makes me angry.
The Aether Swooper?
Yes.
Yeah, what the crud is this? So Aether Swooper is a 1 and a blue for a 1/2 flying creature. When Aether Swooper enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever Aether Swooper attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token.
Someone please sell me on this card, because can you?
It's a 1/2, so it noms all your opponent's little 1/1 flyers.
All right.
And then it just generates an extra creature, so it's just a little extra value. I don't think this card is good.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Moving on. One of the other good cards in mono blue that I don't think the last mono blue deck did not have is a Null.
A very good card.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the better sideboard options. There is a Bone Splitter in his sideboard as well.
I guess that, if you need to switch out that Flare Husk, but I think most of the time when you're bringing in Bone Splitter, you just want both, and I think that's when you're trying to just go fast.
Yeah. Psychic Barrier is the only other oddball. That's just blue for counter target creature spell. Its controller loses 1 life. So, this one was kind of a spicy one. Some really peculiar choices that I would be curious to sort of pick the brain of the pilot and kind of try to understand what his mentality was. Should we talk about 8th place?
Yep.
Okay. This one, just straightforward Boggles. Yeah, I think this deck is good, and I think that the addition of the cartouches have kind of
And I don't know if it's
really
average
stepped
anymore,
it
but
up.
this one's at least playing one cartouche of strength in the main board. And
Yeah.
that comes in and out of the main board depending on I think what people are trying to or looking to go against. And then I mean it is playing one Aranara lid, and I've seen lists without those. Because it feels weird playing one when it's not hexproof, but the deck can only there's only 3 good hexproof creatures, let's face it. And
Yeah.
it maxes out on those. Wait, no, this is not maxed out.
Yeah.
It's
That's
cut
what
to
I was
Glade
about to
Cover
say.
Scout.
It's cut a
Wow.
Glade Cover Scout. So, yeah. I feel like you kind of have to max out on your hexproof guys. Like that needs to be your first priority when creating your creature bases. You start with 12 hexproof creatures.
I don't think Heliod's Pilgrim is worth it. Like to play an extra Heliod's Pilgrim over a Glade Cover Scout. Maybe that's like they're making more of a tutory version, and that's why they get to play that cartouche of strength.
Yeah, that one of cartouche. I just feel like maybe that's too slow for what Boggles wants, but I don't know. Maybe it's fine. Turn 3, make your Pilgrim. Turn 4. So I don't know. Like you played your a 1/1, and then you put I don't know an Ancestral Mask on it or something.
Yeah,
and another
it's
one
not
mana
super quick.
champion.
Like Boggles is pretty quick, but
Yeah.
a lot of the time they do spend their time casting Abundant Growth and Utopia Sprawl. Just like Utopia Sprawl really doesn't take much time to play. In fact, most of the time it's free.
Yeah, but playing Utopia Sprawl on one is sort of what I don't know. It kind of gives the deck speed and burst, right?
Yeah, but it's usually turn 4, turn 5 that you're trying to go off. So I don't know if
Sure.
just by that time maybe they just know that you're going to have enough 1/1s, because most of the time when you fight Boggles, they have 1/1s in play and they're just like, well, now I don't do anything.
Yeah. Okay. Is Colony Garden common in these decks?
Yeah, it was printed at common, and
that was a good joke. 5 out of 7. Perfect score.
The 5 out of 7 joke, I don't even know the reference, but is it old yet?
It is an old joke, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or do you mean is it old and right now as in like I've said it 5 or 6 times?
I think we're probably at the low of at the 6th time you say it, it's not very funny, and then it'll get more funny. So let's keep it going.
We just overload the listeners to the point that they're just like, okay, all right. I don't know. All right, anyway.
But I think I believe Colony Garden is a fairly average card. I don't care for it in the list. But
I feel like Cartouche of Solidarity has kind of made it overkill. Like you've got the Cartouches of Solidarity to help you play around Edict effects. You don't really need this tapped land, to help you with that anymore. But this deck also has 3 copies of Young Wolf in the sideboard. I don't know if that's super common either, but that card also just helps with Edict matchups.
It's fairly normal, I want to say, for a Boggles list, because Edicts are your bane, and just having extra copies of guys with Young Wolf is pretty good.
Okay, cool. Well, that was our top 8. One of the more polarizing top 8s that we've seen in a while. There's usually a lot more diversity. The But before we finish up, you kind of wanted to touch on ninth place.
Yeah, I always want to touch on the deck that didn't quite make it, just to get a little bit more diversity in what we talk about in here a little bit. But it's mono black. It was the big dog of like mono black. I feel like was the best deck in the format when I got into Pauper. So when it went away, I was sad, and I just like seeing it again. And they have like Snuff Out, 2 Oubliette, a Pestilence. But yeah, just honorable mention, mono black.
Honorable mention, mono black. All right. Well, that's the show. Hope you guys enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed talking. I don't know about Sean. I like hearing my voice. I don't always like hearing me back what I say. Like I'll go back and listen to like the podcast, and I'll hear some of the things I say, and I'm just like, "You're an idiot."
I'm kind of indifferent. I kind of don't like hearing you talk, but okay.
That was a good joke. 5 out of 7. Perfect score. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for listening, supporting the show. We really appreciate it. Again, check out our sponsor, Pure MTGO. You can support the show on Patreon. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CKPodcastMTG, or you can shoot us an email, commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. Sean, where can the listeners get a hold of you or find you or learn more about you, stalk you, learn your deep secrets?
So my address is I'm just kidding. So you can find me at Lobbert on YouTube, Lobbert. I haven't posted in a while. It's because no one's holding my feet to the fire and making me make videos. Yeah.
Make a video.
I will. I have a whole bunch of decks. You know what? Brandon, you need to come over to my house and help. Just force me to play some Magic. That sounds like fun.
I actually don't know where your new place is.
Well, stalk me and find out.
Ooh.
The only other thing I wanted to talk about that's a little bit funny is I was going through recent videos on YouTube trying to find some, because this is the way I search for Pauper content, is I type in what deck I want to play, type in Pauper, hit enter, sort by the most recently posted videos, and you have to sort through a lot of stuff where people are just tagging the wrong stuff. But then I started finding my own videos that someone else had downloaded and put on their channel. I have like 500 views on most of these videos, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna copy this guy's content. And so I had to I had to submit, I'd report it and submit takedown stuff. And that was just weird. Like, why would anyone want to copy my stuff?
Don't steal Lobbert's things.
Yeah, I'll come after you.
He's gonna get you. He's gonna scred you.
All right, let's get out of here, Brandon.
Okay. Hey, if you want to find me, you can follow me at Twitter. Wow, what's my Twitter handle? I usually have it written down. Wow, I actually have to go to Twitter right now and look at my Twitter handle.
Brandon plays Pauper at Destructive.
You can follow me on Twitter at @bclark_CK, lowercase b, capital C, silent E at the end of my name.
Nice and easy to type in.
Yeah. Sometimes I forget about the silent E at the end of my name. Yeah, I actually did that in high school. I turned in a test in science class without an E at the end of my name. And my science teacher was also my wrestling coach. So I turned in my test, went back, sat down at my desk, and 10 minutes later he got to mine. And he just stops and looks up at me and goes, "Are you an idiot, Clark?" And I went, "What, coach?" can't even remember the damn E at the end of your name like you're some kind of moron. Learn how to spell your name, idiot. And I was just like, thanks, coach.
Well, my middle name is Robert, and I had 2 B's in Robert until I was 15, and there's not a second B in my name. So I had spelled my name wrong like the first 15 years of my life. So I guess I can't I can't say anything.
Oh man. Anyway, that's the show. Thanks so much for joining us. You will catch us again next week. It's really important that we get back onto a regular casting schedule. So me and Sean are going to be here with you. We're going to be recording every Tuesday. Hopefully we'll have this show out by Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday, kind of depending on how busy Spencer is. He does a lot. So make sure to send your love his way. Check out Constructed Criticism, his podcast. Check out his YouTube channel. He does a lot of great content, and he does a lot of awesome stuff for this show. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Aloha.